Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at some games from one of the premier events that is held online on the site of chess.com. Now, the event in question is titled Tuesday. It's an event that happens every Tuesday. I've actually won it quite a few times, but for today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some games that were played by the famous YouTuber and aspiring to be Grandmaster, Levy. Now, the title Tuesday was played yesterday on Tuesday, June 25th. Levy got off to a really good start. He won his first 3 games, including a win against the strong German Grandmaster Matthias Bluebaum. And now we're going to start with round number 4, where he's playing with the black pieces against the Russian Grandmaster Kil Alexenko, who currently represents the country of Austria. So Levy's on 3 out of 3, playing with the black pieces, and off we go. So the game starts with the move e4. And now we get the move d5 being played here by Levy. Now, when Levy goes d5 in this position, Levy decides to try and play the center counter or the Scandinavian opening. It's a system that makes a lot of sense from Levy's perspective because usually he plays the Hikaru, and you can get very similar structures, for example, with this queen on a5, followed by bishop to f5 and e6. So after d5, we get takes, knight c3, queen a5, knight f3, Levy goes knight f6, we get d4 and this move bishop f5. Now we have knight to e5 and the move c6. Now in the Hikaru, very oftentimes you get the structure with the 4 pawns from b7 to c6 as well as f7 to e6 with the bishop outside of the chain. It is very similar, and I do think that for a player like Levy, playing similar structures where the pawns are on the same squares, the ideas tend to be pretty congruent, they tend to be very similar, and that bodes very well for a player like Levy. So after c6, we get this move a4 being played here by Alexenko. Now, this move is a little bit of a surprise to me. I don't necessarily understand the concept, although white might want to go knight c4 and not be kicked away. So, for example, after we get this move knight bd7, knight c4, and queen c7, here the pawn on a4 stops black from ever playing b5 in one go, and maybe white can even go a5 or a6 down the road. On the other hand, by pushing the pawn to a4, you create this weakness on the b4 square where the bishop can move to. So after queen c7, we get a5, e6 played here by Levy, we get g3, and now this move h5. Now h5 is an interesting choice here from Levy. It's not a move that I'm a big fan of personally, because here white is aiming to both fianchetto the bishop with bishop g2 and put it on the long diagonal, but there's also bishop to f4 as well to harass the queen on c7. Computer likes the move knight d5 here, and the reason it likes this move is that it stops this move bishop f4, and if white ever trades on d5 after takes, and bishop f4, queen c8 here, there's a lot of pressure towards the pawn on c2 from the queen and the bishop, and if white goes knight e3 here, black has this very nice in-between move bishop b4, let's say c3, you can sack the bishop, and after takes, king e2, you go queen b2 check. If white goes king f3, it's uh-oh spaghetti-o, you lose the rook and the game, and if you block with the queen, you lose the rook, and after king e1, queen to c3, back and forth. This game should end in a draw by repetition. So Levy goes h5 instead. We now get bishop f4, queen d8, and now we have the move bishop g2. Levy plays knight d5 in this position. Very good move, by the way, because if white has one more move, say you play bishop e7, and white can go a6 here, suddenly black is in a lot of trouble as the white bishop is targeting these pawns on b7 and c6, and black is struggling mightily. So Levy goes knight d5 here, trying to either take the bishop or connect his pawns and create the classic connect 3. Here, Alexenko trades, and now he goes knight to d6. We get takes, and this move knight to f6. Now, after this move bishop b4, you might be thinking, Levy's in a lot of trouble here because the black king cannot castle out of the center of the board. But because the center is so closed here and there are no open files, black is actually completely fine. So Levy goes h4. We get c3 here, another logical move, creates the connect 3, but it also supports the classic wooden shield for the bishop on b4. Here we get bishop to e4 played by Levy, and now we get f3, and the bishop drops back to g6. Now this is a very nice finesse move from Levy, because in this position, you're probably going, why go here and force f3? But the thing is, if you look at this position, if white were able to play some quiet moves like, say, c4 and try to open up this long diagonal, this bishop could potentially become very powerful. So after f3 is played and we get bishop g6, now the bishop is walled in by the pawn, and if you ever push the pawn, now I get this really nice outpost for the bishop or the knight on the e4 square. So now the bishop on g2 is not really doing a whole lot in this position, and the game continues with a6. We got b6, and now we have this move king to f2. White is trying to finish his development here by moving the king to f2 and potentially connecting the rooks from a1 to h1, or bringing a rook to the center of the board to attack the pawn on e6 down the road. We get knight g8 here, played by Levy, queen e2, knight to e7 here. Levy might want to go knight f5 here to pressure the pawn on g3, or just castle the king out of the center of the board as the bishop no longer prevents the king from moving. So we get queen b5, now we get king to f8, queen e2, and Levy plays king g8 here. He's manually castling his king out of the center of the board, and due to the closed nature of the center, this bishop being walled in, no open files here like the E or D files, even though this looks very slow and sort of a little bit weird, it's actually completely fine. So we get rook e1, Levy plays knight c6, now we have bishop a3, and here Levy goes knight to a5. Now the computer doesn't love this move, but in a blitz game, it's a move that I think even I would play. I think maybe you should go rook c8 first, followed by knight a5, but it doesn't really matter all that much. So we get king g1. Levy goes knight c4, and now we get this move bishop b4. Levy decides to trade on g3, and he plays the move queen g5. Now, it's interesting to note the computer for the last probably 5 moves has been screaming for white to play g4 and not allow black to open up this h-file. At any rate, we get this position after queen g5, takes queen g5, where now there's an open h-file for the rook, and this queen on g5 is putting a lot of pressure on the g-file. So here we get this move queen to f2, which guards the pawn on g3, and now Levy goes rook c8. Here Alexenko plays rook d1, and we get the move queen to h6, and king f1 is played. Now king f1 is close to losing in this position. It's not a very good move. What Alexenko should have played here was the move b3, sort of ignoring this check on h2, because after queen h2 and king f1, knight has very, very few squares that are available in this position. In fact, the only square where the knight can move without being captured here is to this a5 square. After knight to a5, white should play Le Bon Cloud with king to e2. If black grabs the pawn, it's a spaghettio. There goes the queen. It gets trapped on h2 and you lose the game. And after you play a move like queen h5 and g4, the show goes on. Black is still a little bit better, but the game is very, very dynamic and it's not clear-cut either way. And anyway, we get king to f1, and now Levy plays the move queen g5. Now, Levy did miss a winning move here. This move queen to h7 does, in fact, win the game, or win material, I should say, because there's a very simple threat. If white goes b3, you can play check here with the queen supporting the bishop. If king g1, queen h2 is checkmate. King has no escape hatch on the f1 square. And if white plays a move like rook to e2, for example, you still have bishop d3, collecting the rook. And last but not least, if white plays queen e2, you go bishop c2, attacking the rook. Rook moves up, you chop it. If the rook moves away, you have bishop d3 once again, winning the queen. So you're going to win some material here. You're going to win this rook on d1 or rook on e2 most likely, and black should win the game. Now again, obviously it's a blitz game. It's not a classical game of chess, but it's still a very neat idea to line up the bishop and the queen to create the classic double-A battery. Instead, Levy plays queen g5, and now we have this move king g1 and the move queen h6, king f1, queen g5 again by Levy. Understandable. Obviously, he's happy with a draw. And now Alexenko plays the move rook to e2, declining to make a draw. Levy plays rook h2, we get king g1, and now we have this move queen h6. Levy has lined up a classic double stack, and if you can get king h7, say we see a couple more moves here, like rook to h8, for example, and let's just say b3, king g8, suddenly black has a legendary triple stack, or what is known as Aliekin's gun, and black is actually completely winning as he's threatening to crash through on the h-file. So Alexenko goes rook e1, Levy plays rook c6. Now this is a move that I'm not a big fan of. I once again would have liked to have seen something like king h7 and rook h8, but he plays this move rook c6. I suspect the reasoning is he was very concerned about b3 and he wanted to be able to retreat this knight back to d6 where the rook can capture if the bishop takes the knight. So we do get b3, knight d6, takes, and now this move queen e3 is played. And at this point, Levy is only about equal here. Now, the reason that Levy's not better anymore is that in this position, even though black has a queen and a rook on the h-file, there really is no way to penetrate here. White is trying to trade the queens off the board, and white is hoping to play on the queen side. Additionally, this rook on d6 cannot get over the h-file very easily, so it's very hard to play. So Levy trades the rooks, or the queens I should say. We get rook h6, and now we have this move king to f2. Now this move is also a mistake from Alexenko. He should have played the move c4 here, trying to open up the center of the board, and if c4 were played, the position remains about equal. Instead, we get king f2, which allows black this great opportunity to play bishop c2, attacking the rook and the pawn, and after you move and black takes the pawn, black is simply up a pawn here and should go on to win the game. Instead, Levy plays rook c6, we get bishop f1, and now rook h2, bishop g2, and Levy spots the tactic at long last with this move bishop c2. Now, after bishop c2, we get rook c1, takes, we have f4, and Levy goes bishop c4. At this point, this is simply a matter of technique because the white pawn on a6 is super weak. We also have the classic connect 5 here from the king to the bishop. Black can go b5 down the road, and technically speaking, this should be a win. But will Levy be able to capitalize? So we get f5. Levy plays rook h6. He does not take right away, by the way, because after rook to a1, suddenly there's pressure towards the bishop and pawn, and after b5, let's just say takes, king g1, rook to h6, and something like bishop f1. There's a lot of pressure towards the bishop and the pawns on the queen side here, and even though black is still better, it's not easy to prove. So you get rook h6, pawn takes pawn, rook takes pawn. Of course, Levy is happy to trade off juicers because in the long run, this pawn on a6 is always a permanent weakness. Chop, chop, we get king to e3, and now Levy plays the move b5. We get king f4, and this move rook to a6. Now, at this point, Levy is up 2 pawns, but due to the activity of the white king being on e5 and pressuring these pawns on e6 and d5, there is still quite a bit of work to be done. So Levy goes rook a2. We get bishop h3, we get rook to e2, king d6, and now Levy plays the move king f7. Now this move is not the absolute best move. In fact, I think already back here, what Levy should have done was play king f7 right away, and after rook to bishop to h3, he should just go king e7, followed by rook to a2 and rook e2 in this sequence, and it's winning. Instead, we get this position after king f7, we have rook to f1, king g6, and now rook to f8. Now, the computer here wants white to play this move rook to a1, whether it's right here or even back in this position, and it's actually not clearly better anymore, but one thing you'll notice here is that at this point in the game, Levy is the one who's up 5 seconds on the clock, and being up 5 seconds here with the extra material is invaluable. So we get rook to f1, king g6, now we get rook to f8, Levy plays rook e3, we get takes, rook to c3, and now let's move rook to a8. Now you'll notice from the computer evaluation this is actually very close to equal here. Black probably is not winning, but again, Levy is maintaining the time advantage, and that gives him great chance to win the game. So we get rook to a3, king c5, Levy goes a6, now we get d5, rook c3, king to b6 here, and this is the critical error. In this position, if white were to play the move king to d4 here, attacking the rook, if rook to a3 and d6 comes here, white is doing very well. Probably should just be a draw. And if you go check, for example, now after king e5, again, the king and the pawn are marching up the board very, very quickly, and black has to actually be a little bit careful not to lose the game. Instead, we get king b6, and now Levy correctly plays this move b4, pushing p up the board. And the reason this is so dangerous now for white is that this pawn, if it gets to b1, is queening with a check here, as the king is on b6. We get d6, Levy goes b3, keeps pushing the p. We get d7, now we have b2, queen, queen, and this move king to a7. And here, Levy plays the move queen g1, the only check in the position, which doesn't lose material, and now black is simply winning. Here we get king takes a6 played by Alexenko, which loses immediately, but even if white were to play a move like queen b6, after takes, and king f5, because this king is so far cut off here, after takes and g5, g4, g3, this is a simply winning rook and pawn endgame. So we get king takes a6. Levy plays check, we get king b5, queen b2 check, and after king a6, we have rook to a3 here, the classic ladder checkmate with the king stuck on the edge, and Levy gets a massive win in round number 4 to move to a perfect score. So, next game we're going to be taking a look at is round number 5. Now, in round number 5, Levy is playing against Alex Grischuk with the white pieces. So we get e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and now Levy plays the move c3. Now, this is what is known as the classic Ponziani opening. It is an Italian creation from many, many years ago. White tries to play c3 and d4 to build the big white center immediately. It's also worth pointing out that I did play this once in the United States Chess Championship against Julio Becerra, I believe in 2008 if I'm not mistaken, and I lost that game with the white pieces. So we get knight f6. Levy plays d4, we get pawn takes pawn, e5, and now the move knight d5 is played, and Levy plays queen b3. Knight b6, cd4, and now we have the move d6. Now, this is all pretty standard theory thus far. What black is trying to do is take advantage of white bringing out the queen very early and a lack of development and a lot of pressure on the center of the board in conjunction with the two b's being able to be activated very quickly. So we get bishop b5, bishop e6, queen d1, bishop e7, knight c3, and now we have the move knight d5, Levy castles, Grischuk castles, and we get the move knight to e4. Here we have bishop g4 being played, and already here the game is starting to drift in black's favor because the pawn on d4 is a little bit weak here. You'll also notice black has this really nice knight on d5 that stops white from pushing the pawn up the board. We got takes, h3, bishop h5, knight g3, and the move bishop g6. Now, this is where we start the middle game phase, where black has the 2 Bs in return for a bishop and a knight, as well as a nice bastion with the knight on the d5 square. Levy goes queen a4, we get this move queen d7, bishop d2, and now we have the move rook f8, and Levy plays b3 to stop black from being able to capture this pawn. Here we have a5, Levy goes rook c1, and now we get the move rook b6, and Levy plays queen c4. Grischuk goes h6 here, a very logical move to create the luft for the king, an escape square or an escape hatch, so there are no classic ice skaters on the back rank. Levy goes rook e1, we get bishop f8, king h2, queen c8, knight h4, and now the move bishop h7, and Levy plays queen e2. Now, one thing that's interesting here is the computer actually wants white to play f4 and f5 to try and take a bit more of the center here with these knights covering this f5 square, but in a blitz game, it's very hard to play like this. No doubt Levy was feeling tremendous pressure as well, as he's playing one of the living legends of the game. So we get queen e2. a4 played here by Grischuk. Now the game is starting to go in the wrong direction, as black is going to be able to open up both the A and the B files and try to create a bunch of kebabs on the second rank. We get takes, and now we have the move queen e8. We get rook to a8, Levy trades the queens, and at this point it's very clear that Levy's going to need a bit of a miracle to survive, because not only is he playing a player who's incredibly strong, but it's in an endgame and his opponent has the 2 Bs or the bishop pair in conjunction with a bastion on d5. So Levy goes a4 here, we get rook b2, knight f3, bishop d3 here, a nice move to try and stop this pawn from further advancing, but also stopping white from playing rook to e2. Get rook a1, rook a8, rook c1, and now we have the move rook to a6. Another very good fundamental move by Grischuk. Guards the pawn on c6, but also stops this white pawn from pushing forward up the board. Levy goes a5, we get bishop to b5 here, a nice move to further reinforce his pawn on c6. The game continues with king g1, and now we have the move bishop e7. Levy goes knight e4, we get f6, knight g3, and now the move king f7, knight f5, bishop f8. Black obviously wants to keep the 2 Bs alive in this position. He does not want to trade them off the board. We get knight g3, g6 played here by Grischuk, trying to push f5 to take away squares from the horse here, and now Levy plays knight e4. We get g5, bishop c3, and now the move rook e2, knight g3, and here Grischuk has to play this move rook to e8. Now, it's very annoying to have to retreat this rook, but the one thing you'll note here is that black can still stack the rooks on the a file. He wants to go king g6 and f5, and these knights are just simply not very well placed. They really have very limited access in the center of the board. So you get bishop d2, king g6 played by Grischuk, and now we have the move rook to e1. Grischuk plays rook a8, knight e4, and king f7 is played. Now, I'm kind of curious if Grischuk intended to play f5 and then simply spotted this nice tactic where white sacks a knight and wins the bishop, or if he was simply trying to massage the position and keep improving before making a critical decision. So you get king f7. Levy goes g4, and this is a move that I absolutely love here, as now white stops black from pushing f5, and white wants to create a bastion with the knight and the pawns on the square on f5 with the classic connect 3. My arrows are bad, so I do apologize. So after g4, we get rook a7, knight g3, Grischuk goes rook e8, we get the chop, and now the move knight f5. Here, Grischuk plays king f7, we get h4, and this move h5 is played. Now, h5 is a move that Grischuk probably played because he was getting a little bit frustrated with the game or the situation here. If white is able to, say, for example, put this pawn on h5, you'll notice in the long run, these pawns on d6 and h6 are always permanent weaknesses. So we get h5, Levy captures, and now we have this move g4, knight h2, and bishop d3 is played. Levy goes knight e3, we get the trade, and this move f5. Now, it's interesting to note the computer gives white a fairly big advantage here, where white only has one extra pawn, but the reason white has the advantage is because here, white can play his move f3 to break up these pawns on f5 and g4. Without this move f3, as we'll see in the game, white is actually in trouble. So Levy goes to h6 instead, we get king g6, rook d1, bishop e4, bishop d2, and now the move bishop to d5. Now, what Grischuk is doing here is he's creating a nice wooden shield with a bishop on d5 that covers a lot of critical squares, and then he is going to capture his pawn on h6 down the road. Knight f1 is played by Levy, we got the trade, and now let's move rook a1, and here f4 is played by Grischuk. Now, at this point, Grischuk is showing great understanding and technique. This knight on f1 is kind of dominated. It can't really jump to the e3 or g3 squares. You have this really nice wooden shield as well. The knight cannot get after this bishop. So the wooden shield here, the weak pawn on h4, which black can capture, and these two pawns pushing up the board, Grischuk should be winning this position. So Levy goes knight h2. We got king h5, rook a3, king h4, and now the move knight f1, and Grischuk plays king g5. Get knight d2, and king f5 is played, and we have the move king f1. Now, it's worth pointing out here that you're probably wondering, can't black go rook h7? Now, while black could go rook h7, after f3, g3, and a6 here, you're going to have to put the rook back on a7, and after king g2, it's not really clear what the next plan of attack is for the black player. So, we get king f5, king f1 being played, rook a6 by Grischuk, king e2, c5, takes, king d3, and now Grischuk rather peculiarly plays the move king to e5. Now at this point, if Grischuk plays the move g3 and starts pushing his p up the board, he is probably winning the game. Now the reason I suspect Grischuk did not do this, he probably thought takes, knight f1, g2, knight e3, king e5, and he probably thought that white could maybe take here and go king c4 and draw the game. Or he thought that after rook a1, white was going to get rook to g1, win the pawn on g2, and the game would be a draw anyway. But if this were to happen after g3 takes here, computer still, I think, says knight f1 is best, and after king e5, rook a1, rook takes a5, sacking the rook. If you take, black gets a new queen. And if you go rook to g1 here, simply rook to a2, guarding the pawn on g2, and creating the classic pyramid, and black will win the game. Instead, we get king to e5, and this is an epic mistake, as now Levy capitalized by finding the best move in the position, which is knight to c4, king e6, and now let's move knight b6. Now, the reason this is so good is that now the bishop is under attack, and if you try to go g3 here, after takes, for example, king c2, you're attacking the pawn on g3. If g2, rook g3 is played here, takes and king b2, the game ends in a draw. You don't capture, by the way, because after rook a2, you'd lose your rook. But after king b2, check, and king c2, you're going to win the pawn, and with black only having one extra pawn on the c file, the game will end in a draw. So we get king d6, but now white is able to play rook to a4, pressuring these two pawns on f4 and g4, and now, as you'll see from the evaluation bar, the computer considers this position to be completely equal. So you get c4, king d4 played, bishop e6, knight takes c4, takes, g3, takes, rook a3, g2, rook g3, and Levy has survived, and now the game is going to be a draw, as after the trade of pawns occurs here, the game is a draw. Both sides have a rook on the board, and there's nothing either player can do. They play a few more moves before the game finally ends in a draw, but Levy survives in round number 5. He gets a very, very nice draw against Alexander Grischuk. Granted, he was completely lost in the game, but he held his nerve better than Grischuk did, actually, because Grischuk was winning and messed it up. So it's a very, very inspiring draw and a win for Levy. He started off 4.5 out of 5. He did lose, I think, the next 2 or 3 games, so he wasn't ever in contention to win prize money. But nonetheless, Levy played very well against players who are considerably stronger and are supposed to be the big favorites against him in blitz games. So if Levy can keep playing like this, it bodes very well for his upcoming events and norm possibilities. So, on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from Title Tuesday featuring the games of Levy Rozman. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back soon with some more great recaps for our YouTube channel. Last but not least, I'd like to apologize. The quality is a little bit off, a little bit janky. I am still here in Morocco. I'm on the road, so I hope you guys enjoyed it nonetheless, and I'll see you all very soon. Have a good one. Bye.